Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe, and welcome everyone to another adventurous podcast where we're going to take you through the world of how you can become an amazing writer and get inspired by an incredible guest this week. But before we dive into that, we want to say thank you very much to our patron of the week. And our patron of the week this week is Julia. Julia, thank you so much for joining the clan, supporting this podcast. And if you would like to be like Julia, that's a good name for a book, isn't it? Be like Julia, you can pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and sign up to get the most unbelievable range of goodies that we would have to take an hour to tell you all about, so we're not going to. But just go and check it out, folks. bestsellerexperiment.com/support. Mr. Stay, we're in Canada right now, choking on smoke. We've heard about Academy members having to evacuate homes. Absolute nightmare. Like it's bonkers. How's life in England? Are you got clean air over there?
Clean air. I mean, the seas are full of sewage, but apart from that, we're fine. Yeah, no, it's horrible watching these fires happening, and it's just so out of your control, you know.
Yeah,
so it's thinking of the folks who have to uproot and have their lives uprooted by that.
Well, all over the world, right? There's all kinds of people having to evacuate. So our hearts and thoughts are with you all. Particularly at this time, but as we are here to focus on positivity and amazing things that are happening in the writing world, there's some interesting things happening this week for you, Mr. Stace. We like to talk about milestones on the podcast, don't we?
We do.
I think on our milestone list there is a milestone which is to do with one of the most important moments in a new book. So, do you want to reveal what you've been working on?
The reveal. Well, I haven't been working on it. A very talented artist called Harry Goldhawk has been working on it. So we're recording this on a Wednesday. On the Thursday, I'm doing a cover reveal for the fourth, which is a Woodville book, The Holly King. And but I'm going to reveal this to you now, Mr. D, so you can see it. So I can get a
pre-reveal,
instant reaction. All right. If I can get the share screen thing to work. So a little drum roll, please.
This is people. If you watch this if you listen YouTube. To the podcast, if you go to YouTube, you can see this. You can actually see what Mark's going to do. But I have not seen this cover. This is very exciting, Mark. I feel very privileged.
God, I hope you like
How many seconds am I going to get?
Oh, there we go.
There it is. Wow.
The Holly King. So, I love it. What do you see? Tell me what you see.
Oh, well, the first thing I was drawn is the title. Then I was drawn to the girl holding a sword.
Yeah.
But then I had to double check. But at the top, there's this kind of godlike creature with antlers.
Yeah.
Looks like some tree god, maybe. I am not sure.
Nice. Okay.
And then I see a fox in the bottom right corner.
Excellent.
But the thing that really draws my eye then is the snow on the trees, so something like wintry, but there's also a big shining light in front of the female figure, which looks very alluring, and I kind of want to dive in. And then what I see is this amazing quote from none other than Michelle Paver.
Michelle Paver!
I know, right? Who we interviewed. Now, Michelle, she was one of the, we have the original 20, like one of the very first people that we interviewed. I always remember her interview. Something about that interview that stuck. I mean, I remember all of them, but there's some things in that interview that always stuck with me.
Yeah.
But she says, creepy, laugh out loud, funny, and genuinely moving. What a brilliant combo.
It's great, isn't it? And do you want to know how I got that?
Yes, how on earth did you get a quote from Michelle Paver?
Well, she came to Waterstones in Canterbury about a year and a bit ago. It was not this winter, but the winter before. And I gave her a copy of The Crowfolk because, I knew her from Orion and what have you. Used to sell her books, and it was lovely to see. And we had a little chat. And I said, would you have a read of this? I said, I know you're incredibly busy, but, so she took it away. And I didn't hear anything for weeks. I thought, she hasn't read it. Fair enough. That's such is life. That's fine. I know she has, because I know she's someone who gets a lot of books sent to her by publishers for quotes and stuff like that. And then one day, a letter arrives in the post, not an email.
Wait,
this is Michelle.
But Michelle said that I remember this in the interview, she said that she uses some really old version of
WordStar.
Like a 90s word processor to write her book. So
hey,
of course she'd write you a letter. She probably doesn't have email.
Wrote me a beautiful handwritten letter, where she went on about how much she enjoyed the Crow Folk, and she said, "And here's a quote if you want to use it for the series." So
and she just gave you a quote. You didn't even ask for it.
Yeah.
Well,
so that was
that's amazing.
It's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, Michelle Paver's amazing. Like I see even over in Canada, like she's from her books are international. I see her books all the time in bookstores in Canada, and whenever I see it, I'm like, oh, there's another Michelle book. Absolutely brilliant. Well, congratulations.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I love the green as well. I love the colour, the whole theme of nature and the Holly King as well. I mean, I'm curious as to what's interesting though. Okay. You put okay, folks, if you're looking at this on YouTube, I'm just doing a good quick analysis of Mark's books. Something's changed. Because if you look at the first 3 books, the size of the title and your name, they're all kind of in the middle to upper of the book cover, and suddenly we've gone big. Yeah. Book 4, like the main title of the book of your new book is taking up, I would say, about a third of the page, as opposed to about a sixth or an eighth of the page. Your name is now in capitals, bold. It's much big. Your name's much bigger, and your name is at the bottom. And I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but I heard that as an author becomes more well known, their name gets bigger and takes more precedent on the page because people are looking for the name as much as they're looking for the book title. Is that right?
Well, I'm
asking the wrong person to tell me because it's all book. But that is true, though, isn't it? That the name, like for Stephen King's name is what sells the book. It doesn't match about the title almost for him.
Yeah, I'm not what they call a brand author, but that is yet. But but what's interesting is there was a conversation about the covers. We all love Harry's work, but we just thought, okay, is there something we can do to sort of tweak it? And also the thing with the Holly King, it's very much a book that if you've not read the others, you can jump in with this one. You can absolutely jump in with this one. So it's sort of designed to appeal to new readers. It still has that, because if you look, all 4 books are framed by trees.
Yes, that hasn't changed.
You got the kind of the ready orange, the blue, the dark blue, the light blue, and now we've got this green, this kind of winter
so it's a different kind of colours. And also, if I'm looking at the first 3 books, I'm seeing kind of like a pastoral kind of setting in each one of them, and this one is like, this is somewhere
you're in the woods now.
We're in the woods, and there's something mystical going on. Really fascinating. It must be okay. Here's a quick question for you. Obviously, when you started writing these books, it was just it was just an idea. I remember you talking about it on the podcast. We could even probably go back to when you were talking about these Woodville book that you'd written many years ago, and you were thinking of doing something with it. We can almost timeline that in the podcast.
Yeah.
How does it feel to sit there looking at 4 book covers next to each, like works of art, because they are works of art? And this is the other thing people don't realize when you write books. Like, it's not just about your book; it's like creating like a piece of art. I mean, how does it feel to see those 4 book covers all next to each other?
I'm a very lucky author. I mean,
isn't that awesome?
I've had so many people tell me they picked the book up just because of Harry's art and the design work on it, and it's and seeing them all together is just brilliant.
Okay, question really for you as well. The Witches of each one of the 3 book covers has got the Witches of Woodville 1, Witches of Woodville 2, Witches of Woodville 3. Yeah. I don't see that on the final cover. Was that designed?
Again, that's a decision to so if anyone picks up,
so it's standalone.
Yeah, people can pick it up thinking, okay, is this new? Whatever,
does it reference it somewhere? Does it reference it somewhere?
Definitely. It'll reference it. I think it's on the back, and I think it will be on the back, and it'll be on the inside of the book. But on the cover, the other thing that's missing from the Holly King cover at the moment is a shout line, which we're currently tinkering with, and I think we'll have one by the time I do the launch tomorrow. I think we got a new sort of thing coming through. Yeah. So all these little things.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Really exciting.
Make
Congratulations! Another milestone. Tick, book 4.
Yeah,
stopping you, mate. There's no stopping. Well, I hope, and the thing I love about this, Mark, is here we are talking about all this stuff, but there you are out there doing it, making it happen, taking all this advice. You're just absorbing everything that we all the interviews you do, and it's just like, and it's all coming out in these books in many ways, which I think is brilliant. Yeah. So I hope that's inspired some people. If you've ever wanted to do that, like create a series of books or even just write that one book, congratulations, Mr. Stave, for giving people a reason to go for it. Proof in the pudding, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Now, you talked about brand authors, actually, and that's something that comes up in today's interview, isn't it? Tell us about our guest this week.
We have the wonderful Andrea Dunlop, who began her career in publishing as a publicist for the likes of Doubleday and all sorts of other authors. And she became an author and consultant. She's based in Seattle. And her latest novel, Women Are The Fiercest Creatures, is a story of three women, basically written out of a successful tech startup's history. And it's a really fun read. Andrea has over 15 years experience in publishing, and she talks really honestly about being on both sides of the publishing experience. And we discuss recurring themes in an author's writing, why writing is like a second reality, and why so much of publishing is out of your control, and what you can do about it.
Brilliant. Well, let's dive in and listen to the inspirational Andrea Dunlop.
Andrea Dunlop, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
It's our absolute pleasure. And we're here to talk about, initially, your brand new book, which has the most amazing title, Women Are The Fiercest Creatures. So tell us about this new novel and its trio of main characters, Anna, Sam, and Jessica.
Yes. So Women Are The Fiercest Creatures is the story of a tech CEO who is about to take his company public, and he ends up facing a reckoning from the three most important women in his life. His new wife, Jessica, who is young and just had her first baby, or actually is pregnant with her first baby when we originally meet her. Anna, his recent ex-wife, who's the mother of his other two children, and his ex-girlfriend, Sam, who was around for the founding of his company and has not really been acknowledged as such. So yeah, it is mostly top line. I hope that people will find it to be a fast-paced, very readable family drama. I feel like my number one job as an author is always to get people turning the pages. So I've gotten some early feedback that it's made people late to things and stayed up past their bedtimes, which is the best compliment you can ever give an author. So I hope that's what people will have an experience with. But yeah, it's a lot about motherhood. I was pregnant when I started it with my older child, and I was pregnant with my younger child when I finished it. So those are really the bookends of the experience. I was just books and babies all happening at once in the last couple of years. And, a lot about sort of being a quote, working mother and how that's treated really differently from being a quote, working father, which is a term that no one ever uses.
Yes.
So just sort of expect people to do both. And, also just the difference in sort of being a female entrepreneur and being a male entrepreneur. And yeah, just I think like technology and how that's affecting us. And it's also sort of a love letter to all my complicated feelings about my hometown, which is Seattle, Washington, which is a place that's changed a great deal since I was growing up here now I'm going to reveal my age, since I was growing up here in the 90s. So yeah, I think I hope people love it. Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, one of the things you're talking about tech CEOs here, the billionaires, the top 1%, and the women behind the throne, to use a rather old phrase. People are going to start thinking, are these characters based on real people? I mean, we think about people like Mackenzie Scott, who's Jeff Bezos's ex-wife. Were there, without getting sued or anything, were there any sort of real life analogs to these characters that you drew upon?
Yeah, what could you possibly be talking about, Mark? I've never heard of this Mackenzie Scott's husband. Who is that?
Seattle.
In Seattle. Don't have anyone like that here. Yeah, certainly the sort of woman behind the man idea, I think, is something that really intrigues me. And I think there's sort of like most things, there's a benevolent version of that, and there's a really toxic version of that, right? And so I think the toxic version happens if the woman's been pushed there. So I think, my father is a successful entrepreneur himself, and he certainly could never have had the life that he has at work or having a family if it wasn't for my mother. And so I certainly think like that's something I've been a party to. Now, in that case, that's the benevolent version of that, because everyone was on board with that. But I think, watching Mackenzie Bezos and everything that she's done and becoming this huge philanthropist. And I mean, that's been really inspiring. I think certainly like, even if not consciously, she is sort of there's a little bit of her in Anna's character. Right. But yeah, I think, just like the climate that we're in, I mean, certainly people I thought a lot about when I was writing this book is like Elon Musk and, and also Steve Jobs, because those guys, we talk about them being fathers, but it's in this very separate way from the way we talk about them as entrepreneurs. So, like Steve Jobs, kind of a famously terrible father. His daughter wrote an entire memoir about how he let her grow up in, poverty while he was making all of this money. And, Elon Musk also like has all these kids by all these different women. And that's sort of his fatherhood is sort of this like, haha, like Elon Musk is trying to repopulate the planet, kind of this joke. Right. And if any woman had this history as a parent, it is the only thing we would ever talk about. And no one would care if they were buying Twitter or, inventing the iPhone or what have you. But with men, we're just able to separate the two. And so I think that was something I thought a lot about while I was writing the book.
And this is this your fourth novel? Am I right? Is this novel number 4?
Yes, this is, fourth published, several more in the drawer, never to be seen again. But
we've all got those, Andrew. We've all got those. How was this markedly different from the previous novels, or do you feel there's some sort of progression in the way that your writing is evolving?
Yeah, I mean, I hope my writing is evolving in that I hope that it's getting better. I think that's what you really hope for with, as a writer as you go. But I think certainly like it's really interesting to get older. I'm so sorry. My dog is outside barking at me. I'm just going to let him in real quick. Apologies.
No problem. No, we love dogs. Don't worry.
Oh, get in here, you naughty man. I have an elderly, I have a 15-year-old 3-legged miniature pinscher. So he is just a little bit needy. Can you lie down, buddy? I know. Can you lie down? Thank you.
We're
sorry.
We're leaving that in. You know that we're going to leave that in, Andrew. Don't worry. We are leaving that in.
That's like the dog moments.
We love
a little
authors'
moment in my
pets.
last interview.
We could do a whole sub podcast about authors' pets. We've had,
He is my buddy. He sits at my feet whenever I'm reading. So he's always here. And now, of course, I have utterly lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Oh, yes, how my writing has progressed.
Evolved, yes.
I mean, I think sort of the tie that I can see is that it's not me putting myself in my books. They're not all based on my life or anything like that. But I think, as you get older as an author, you have more stages of life that you're able to write about. And that has been really interesting. And so I think for me, I turned 40 last year. Like this is my sort of coming of middle age novel, right? I talk a lot about sort of being in the middle of your life and seeing some of those early promises of your youth have come to fruition and some have not. And maybe your life turned out the way you thought, or really it's really different than the way you thought. And sort of that, I think that's a really interesting thing about being this age rather than being in your 20s where you're just all a ball of like chaotic possibilities.
Well, let's go back a little bit further, because as I understand it, your mother used to find little scraps of paper with dialogue written on them, left by young Andrea. Tell us about that and how that all. This is the start of your career, essentially. Tell us about that, Andrea.
Oh, Mark, I love it. You really did good research for the show. Yeah, that is, my mom always tells me that, she's like, I'm ready whenever Oprah wants to talk about how you first became a writer. Like, I was there. Yeah, I mean, I was always really drawn to books, always really drawn to storytelling, wanted to be a writer from the time I was a kid. And yeah, I think like, this is probably the place where I can go and indulge myself a little bit in like the woo-woo elements of being a writer, because I think like there's a lot of it there's a lot of it that's practical, right? A lot of it is like butt in your seat, writing words, rewriting words. A lot of it is, practice and just like working on your craft and just being there, just doing it is like, a huge percentage of the battle. But I think there's also a little something mystical and magical about writing. And for me, it's that sort of like other track that I have going in my brain at all times where there's just like a story there. And, it's not like I just sit down and like channel it, but there always is something there. It's like when I finish a book, the next book is sort of like, there it is, and that makes it sound more simple than it is, because there's a lot of like fighting out, like, what is this actual book? But like, I've always kind of had that, right? I've always kind of had this like second little reality going on in my brain. So I'm probably lucky that I'm a writer, because otherwise I think that would be a sort of unmanageable brain to have without being a writer.
I think it's something a lot of writers, it's something we have in common. It is, my co-presenter, Mr. DeVoe, he loves a bit of woo-woo, and he's going to love this. But when we write, and when it's going well, it is like going to kind of a parallel universe, isn't it? Where we have a bit more control about the world and we can make sense of it. Is that what it feels like to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's almost like you go into the void a little bit, and I always learn things about myself when I'm writing. And I think, looking at this book that, you sort of, I in no conscious way based any of this on myself. And yet I see those themes that I write again and again that always come up, one of which is being reunited with long lost family members, which is something that's come up now in 3 of my 4 books. Again, not even something I necessarily like set out to write about, but you see your same preoccupations and themes kind of come through, and that's just that's not because I meant to put those in there, but it's something that you are sort of sorting through your unconscious, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very common for authors to tackle the same thematic ideas over and over, but from different angles. In that, it's the thing that preoccupies us the most, and this is how we make sense of this stuff. I have to go back though. What sort of dialogue were you writing on those little scraps of paper? I'm dying to know.
I don't really know. Oh. I wish I had them. I know. I wish I could give you some more insight. My dad had this. He used to get these huge pallets of like these little mini legal pads, and so I would always write on those. And I remember it, but I just think like. And my mom also always talks about the fact that I always had like my little, like my Cheerios would talk to each other, or like if I was trying to like do a craft project, my beads would talk to each other. And, that I always just had sort of like, I was like a major anthropomorphizer, right? I was like, I would think of like different numbers as having different personalities and different colors as having personalities. And like everything just sort of took on like a story and a narrative. And so I think like that dialogue was probably just like whatever was going on in my head, which sounds a little wacky, but maybe not so much because I did become a novelist, but not to
the people listening to this podcast. They're all going, yes.
Yes, you guys are my people, you're like, yes, we all understand. We all have constant chatter of characters in our heads that we think about all the time. Yeah.
Let's talk about another pivotal sort of meeting in your career when you met the author, the novelist Polly Devlin.
Yes. Oh, Polly, what a wonderful person. Yeah. So this was when I was working in publishing and living in New York, and I was working as a publicist for Doubleday. And I got to work on Sophie Dahl's book. So if you're British, some of your audience is British, you'll probably know this is Roald Dahl's granddaughter, who also became a famous model and has done a bunch of other things. And through her, I met Polly Devlin, who is a wonderful Irish writer who at the time was teaching at, I want to say, Barnard. So I just struck up a friendship with her, and we would meet for coffee. And I was very shy at that point in my life. I was probably like 25. I was very shy at that point in my life about saying that I was a writer, because I think when you're working at Random House and you're like surrounded by, you're like, oh, I don't want to be like, I'm a writer too, it's just, I felt very sort of, squeamish about that. And so I would always sort of like bring it up bashfully if someone like dragged it out of me. And so sure enough, she did. She was like, well, what are you working in publishing? Like, what are you? Yeah, I'm actually working on a novel. And so she said, well, how is it going? And I said, oh, it's not going very well. I'm not making very good progress. And she said, right. So you have several things working against you. You are a young person in the most exciting city in the world. You have a full-time job, and I can't remember what the other thing was now, but those were the two big ones. Basically just like, what you're going out, you're 25-year-old in New York City. This is a distracting place, you are, and you're working full time. And so she said, could you write in the mornings before you go to work? And I did not like the sound of that because I am chronically not a morning person. And certainly in those days I was staying out late at nightclubs and that kind of thing that you do when you're 25-year-old in New York. So that didn't sound like a very fun idea. And she said, and I said, oh, I guess. And she said, well, let me tell you what's going to happen if you don't. You will be sitting here 10 years from now wondering why you never finished your novel. And that put the fear of God into me.
Right.
So much that I was up the next morning. And sure enough, in a couple of months, I did finish my novel and I got an agent and it was very exciting. And I was pretty sure I had made it. And then we did not sell that novel. And then I went through a couple more false starts before that. But it's certainly like that got me going. And it was just, and it's really funny now as, a person with two children and sort of umpty 11 things going on to think of myself as like, oh yes, 25-year-old Andrea, you're so busy. Like, how could you find time to write with all of that, with all that cocktail having and, just like completely, it's like a completely no one depending on you. But yeah, it's certainly like, it was the right thing at the right time for someone to say to me. And I've held on to it ever since. And I really, it turned me into a morning writer person. And I really I felt the joy of that, and I go back to that now because I'm several books in, and sometimes the sort of grind of the industry can get you as a writer. And I kind of remember being 25 and waking up, at 7:00, which seemed like a really early hour at that age. And I would go down to the Dunkin' Donuts and I would get my big, gigantic iced coffee because it was summer, very hot and humid. And I would go sit at my desk for an hour and it just felt like such a gift. It really made me happy. And I always remember that I'm like, it's the writing that makes you happy. It's not like the publishing stuff is in a separate bucket, but this feels good. And so I always try and get back in that spirit especially when I'm writing a new draft and I don't have to really talk business about it to anybody.
Well, that brings me on to my next thing, because you've spoken before about that separation of being an author and being a business person. And of course, you mentioned that you're a publicist for Doubleday as well. And, I've worked in publishing myself as well. And you do realize that you have to kind of separate those two things. There's the creative part of you and there's the business, marketing and publicity side. How are you managing those roles? And do you have any sort of tips for readers on that, on how to do that?
Oh, I mean, yeah. So I did. I started my career at Doubleday, and then I sort of worked a few other publishing adjacent jobs before becoming sort of full-time I will say in 2016, when my first novel came out, I moved to being like a full-time consultant, just working for myself and writing. And now I'm writing and podcasting, and that's sort of my job makeup. But yeah, so I did start off in, traditional, stayed amazing. Back then it was Random House. Now it's Penguin Random House. It almost became Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster. So if anyone was following that story, but that did not happen. I got shut down for the best, I think. But yeah, so I mean, I did start at this, incredible publisher. I worked with amazing editors there, like Nan Talese, who edits Ian McEwan, and among other people, and Margaret Atwood, and just all these incredible names. And it was in some ways intimidating, but also really an incredible way to learn the business. And I think working in publicity in particular was really helpful because you sort of saw where the rubber hits road. You're working through the actual book launches and seeing them go from being inside the publishing house to outside the publishing house, and all of the ways that, that can go well or go badly. And working on a lot of books that were really wonderful, beautiful books by very lovely authors that we, as my wonderful former colleague, Todd Dowdy used to say, couldn't get him arrested in Times Square. You just couldn't find, couldn't get any publicity for them. It's very hard. It's very challenging to get people to pay attention to books. I think it's better now than it was when I was working in publishing, because now you have more options. Writers feel all kinds of way about those options, but we did not have podcasts. We did not have social media in anything like what it is now. And so certainly there are more ways that people learn about books, and certainly like, with Book Talk, which if you are interested in that, please check out my friend Lee Stein. She does amazing content about how Book Talk can work for authors, including you capital L literary folks out there. And, that the market has actually expanded over the last couple of years. There are more people reading books by a pretty significant percentage than were reading books a few years ago. That's incredibly exciting. So I think it was to see how the sausage is made a little bit. And I think it prepared me well to be a working author in this industry. I went into my first book with no serious delusions about what that process would be like. I knew that I was not going to be the lead title at the big publishing house where it was being published and that kind of thing. And so I think having that understanding of the industry was really helpful. I just really try and draw a curtain between those two sides of my brain. And it is hard because now, once you're a working author, you're sort of always in some kind of production cycle, or at least your agent wants to know what you're working on. And of course, that all sounds very dreamy when you're not published, right? All you could ever hope for was somebody actually waiting on you to write a book. But I think it can feel very different when you're in it. And, and really just the roller coaster of publishing will always be just that, a roller coaster. And I think just resilience is the biggest factor. I think just keeping going is a win. Most people don't. There's, I think, some huge percentage of people drop off after book 3, I think it is. The huge percentage of people never get a book published, period. And then, it gets fewer and fewer as you get more books in. So I like to remind myself and remind others that if you're still trying and you're just still writing, that's a win. And also maybe give yourself another way to make money. I think that's always have something else in your professional sort of sphere. I think that, the thing that makes me the most anxious is when someone says, I really want to write a novel. I think I'm going to quit my job and take a year off and do it. And I'm like, oh no, don't do that. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Perseverance is, again, you and I will have seen this because, we've worked in publishing. The people who endure are the people who keep going. It is very easy to give up and just walk away and throw the towel in, but perseverance counts for an awful lot. I also see that setting goals is really important for you. You're sort of goal oriented. Is this something you do on a regular basis in terms of your career? Now you're up to book 4. What's new for you? What's ahead for you, Andrea?
Well, I'm working on, so I have a bunch going on right now. So right now I'm actually, I just turned in a new draft of my nonfiction book that I'm working on. It's the first time I've written nonfiction, which has been really interesting and totally different from writing novels. And so I do have that project coming out in probably 2024. That is a true crime book that I'm co-writing with a detective. We are tackling 3 Munchausen by proxy cases. That is the other part of my life with the podcast. And so that has been really interesting. And I'm actually working on a couple of different fiction projects. I don't usually write 2 things at the same time, but I had something that I had a big chunk of that I sent off to my agent, and it is a sequel to one of my books. I won't say which yet. And then I have a new idea for a novel that I've just started. So I just like to be working on something. I think that's the part of me where I just come back to, I like writing. Writing is the thing that was fun to me when I was a kid. It was the thing that I enjoyed in college. It was the thing that was with me long before I was ever an industry person. And it's the thing that will be with me until I am gone from this earth, until my brain has somehow scrambled itself. That's to me, that's a gift. And so I think when I can get myself in that mindset, it really helps with all those anxieties about the industry, because there will always be a million factors that you cannot control. Yeah. Nobody, if anybody tells you that they know how to pick the next bestseller, unless you are like Reese Witherspoon and you can actually do it, or Oprah, but anybody else, it's really nobody knows, and no one knows how a book is going to be received, the moment it's going to publish into, what's going to be happening behind the scenes at that publishing house. I mean, there's so many factors. I feel like I have seen it all at this point between my work in publishing and being an author. I've had all kinds of experiences publishing books. And so I think like the more you can just sort of like detach from that a little bit, the better.
Was it kind of freeing knowing how the sausage is made in publishing in a way, in that you didn't feel like you had to write Gone Girl, or you didn't have to write to a best-selling formula? And I say this as co-presenter of the bestseller experiment. Was it freeing just knowing that actually you just want, because there are no guarantees, there are no certain paths to success, or did you feel obliged to add certain elements to a story in order to make it more commercial?
No, I think that's a losing I think that's a bad way to write books. Number one, I just don't think that sounds like much fun as a writer. But I also think, listen, with the way publishing timelines work, the time you turn in a final manuscript to it being on shelves is often a year, right? Whatever trend is happening, it may not be happening when that book comes out, and likely it won't, right? And so, Losing the Light, which was my first novel, which went through many iterations before it got published. And there was a time when I could not find an agent for that. And then I rewrote it. I spent 10 years putting that in a drawer and taking it back out before it got published. And on one of those first attempts that did not get off the ground, one of the pieces of feedback I got from an agent, she said, "This is really great. I could see this being in the kind of sweet spot between, commercial and literary fiction. But it's just so hard to sell anything right now that doesn't have a paranormal element," because this was in the time of like Twilight and vampires. And so I really had this fleeting thought of, well, maybe Alex, one of the main characters, could be a vampire. And then I was like, oh my God. I was like, Andrea, step away, step away. Because that's not the story that you're writing. And I think you're not going to do it well if you're trying to force yourself in. Now, there are people that there is a certain kind of formulaic writing that I think people can plug into, some of these like sci-fi romance that has all of these different sort of subgenres, and they have very strong conventions, and they have a formula in a good way, right? Where like the readers want these beats. And so there are writers that sort of fit themselves into that really well. And so that's sort of a separate thing. But I think for if you are writing in some place that has really strong conventions, then you can sort of look at okay, what's hot, what's working. And I do think it's interesting. I don't advocate for completely unplugging for what's happening in the industry. I think it's really fascinating to look at how the industry is working, what's popular, when and why. And I think, once something gets to be a phenomenal success, I feel like I have to read it, because I just want to know, even if I'm not the primary reader of this, what is it that's getting people? What is it that's resonating so much in this particular moment with this particular book that's really hitting people? Because I think that's just really interesting to try and understand. I just don't think it works very well to try and reverse engineer it as an author. But I think as a reader and sort of part of the community, it behooves you to understand, why is every single person on the earth reading Colleen Hoover right now? And looking into that and, and thinking how are these out of the box successes happening? And is there sort of a range? Is there some takeaway that can help me more with my marketing? Not necessarily writing to it, but looking at your existing work and applying some of those principles, I think is more helpful than actually thinking about what to write next. Fantastic.
Well, Andrea, this has been just wonderful speaking to you. There's so much insight into what's going on in the publishing world as well. Best of luck with Women Are The Fiercest Creature and all those amazing projects that you've got coming soon as well. Great to speak to you, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Mark. This was a fantastic interview.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh, and Andrea just mentioned those words of how writing is mystical. She had me hooked from the very beginning.
I knew you'd like that.
But she's so it's so true though, isn't it, Mark? It's this unspoken magic. And however you want to define it, there's this unspoken magic and connection that we get when we go into that world. We sit down and we just disappear off into this world of storytelling. And it is mystical and it is beautiful. And it's it's so easy to forget within the challenges of writing and how we like carry all these backpacks on our back of all the struggles, us poor. But let's get back to the pure joy of what this is about. It's like there is something magic that happens every single time anyone sits down to write. You can never ever fully predict what's going to come out at the end of the session. So you're always going to be in awe of what may or may not occur. And I love the fact that Andrea reminded every single writer of that today. And I think it's so important for people who are stuck in the mire to remind themselves, this is why you do it. This is why you show up. No one ever gets into writing because they hate it. Everyone gets into writing because they love it. They're fascinated by it. They want to develop themselves. And this is the core of what we're about.
Yeah. And I appreciate that writing is difficult. And it can make you want to tear your hair out, and you'll have days when it's just not working at all. But even on those bad days, there's an alchemy happening. You are making something out of nothing. And we're the only creatures that do it. We're the only, creatures that we know. Maybe the whales do it. There's a thing in the news at the moment. Lots of orcas are attacking boats off the coast of England. I don't know if you've seen this, the coast of the UK. So maybe they're talking to each other. But yeah, as far as we're aware, we're the only creatures who make these stories up and share them. And it's one of the ways that we express ourselves. And by creating something, by doing that, by sharing these stories, we become better people. I think it's about empathy and understanding other people's points of view and making sense of the world. And we're going to talk in the extended version about theme and the themes that preoccupy us in greater depth. But that is another huge key for me. I mean, this morning I sat down and genuinely only had the vaguest idea what I was going to write. And I'm lucky in that I got a good solid 90 minutes this morning, and I had a really, really good idea of what's now going to happen in the next chunk of the story. And I'm going to spend the next few days developing that. But that thing of learning to love the process of learning, even though it's going to be hard, even though it's you're going to be sort of sweating bullets for a while and just trying to hammer the keys or just write any old nonsense down. But if you stick at it, something weird and magical does happen, and you do manage to pluck a story or a moment or a beat or an idea out of thin air that gives you the fuel to keep going. And it's why I keep coming back for more, even though we have bad days, even though there are days when everything seems piled against you. The process of it is what I love more than anything else. And as Andrea said, the writing is what makes you happy, not the publishing, not the jumping through hoops, not the publicity, not the uploading your book to this or that or the other. Yeah. And I know we talk about these amazing milestones and cover reveals and things like that, but you wouldn't have any of that if it wasn't for that just putting one damn word after another.
Yeah. And actually, when you think about it, and you think about if you were to put all the struggles into one little pot, and you would put all the time you spend actually in the mystical joy of writing, if we put it that way, you've got to keep in perspective that the struggles are quite a small percentage compared to all the writing that we do that we love. Let's always remind ourselves of that this pot that everyone focuses on, because it is the bit you have to work at, because it's the bit we've got to learn the craft. We've got to, how do we fix this? It becomes a real focus because of the things that we've got to fix. It's like when the car breaks down, there might be a flat tire. The rest of the car's brilliant. The engine's beautiful, the interior's clean, and we're focusing on the flat tire, and I'm stuck on the side of my Porsche. It's stuck on the bloody side of the road with a flat tire. And it's like, let's focus on the flat tire. Let's remember, though, that there's a beautiful car sitting there, which as soon as that flat tire is fixed, we can get back to enjoying driving it. And that's the joy of writing. So I want people to really, really work hard at this. We've got to keep reminding ourselves that, yes, it is hard, but the struggle is a small percentage for the gain that we get of the joy when we sit down and the magic happens. And I'm sure today, anyone listening to this who's done their 200-word challenge, if we were to poll them and say, what kind of a day did you have? We'd get a few flat tires. Oh, couldn't write a bloody thing. And then we'll get hundreds of people saying, oh, I had an amazing day. I had a massive breakthrough. I wrote this thing. And there'll be and we just got to keep focused on the good stuff and just know that we're going to get flat tires and think, right, okay, flat tire, how do we repair it? Right, fixed, let's get it back on the road again. Talking of which, though, it starts in childhood, doesn't it, Mark? And we've got to remember that we've been practicing for this all our life. And Andrea, I loved how Andrea talked about this idea that she had everything talking with each other, even Cheerios in her cereal, whatever she said. I love that we're starting to develop these skills at a very, very young age, aren't we?
Yeah, that thing of, play. Writing, in a way, is a slightly more formalized version of play, where you sit down with dolls or action figures or whatever and act out little scenarios.
That's what kids do.
You see them. They have little arguments, and sometimes they've been listening to mummy and daddy have an argument, and they'll replay it. And again, it's making sense of the world. It's them going, okay, well, what happens if these two characters have an argument over who gets the last biscuit? Okay, so that's what if you're sitting down with your dolls and you're having a little tea time thing, and what's the conflict in this scene? What can this scene be about? So yeah, I think I know some parents might worry when they see their kids talking to themselves or talking to their dolls or whatever. But for me, it's a sign of a very healthy imagination, should be nurtured.
Well, I want to also just say to parents out there, being at the kind of almost at the other end of, parenting, in terms of like kids at home, that we all do it as children, like we all play these games and but if in the case of like Andrea, like if you see that there is exceptional talent, if you like, within, they always are like making stories up and they've got this incredible creativity, really nurture that at a young age and encourage them when they're old enough to start writing creative stories. And why don't you that game you were playing with, why don't you write a little story? Here's a little book for you just to write. Why don't you just try writing that down? It'd be really fun to read it. Maybe you can record what happened, just to kind of get them into that process. Because we hear so many stories, don't we, on the podcast, Mark, about how a grandparent, I remember one guest said, their grandparent really took them under their wing and really nurtured their writing and encouraged them to write and helped them write. And she became a very successful author. Like there's so much amazing work that can be done at a young age. And so do nurture it. If you see it, don't just go, oh yeah, that's because all kids do that. If you see a lot of that, then give them a pencil and a little notepad and ask them to write their story out for you.
But why do we only let kids have this fun?
Well, exactly.
When do we get that drummed out of us?
Exactly. This is we're kind of like the big kids podcast, really, aren't we?
Yeah. Two things I want to come back: nap time and and reading time, and also playtime, where I can sit there. I mean, just look behind me. That's an Arrested Development on display there. Star Wars figures and
I embrace my inner child. Jen once said to me, as an adult, I always remember this. She said to me, "It's not when you're an adult. It's not great to be childish, but it's really good to be childlike." I always remember that. I'm like, I want to be childlike. I want to have this kind of inner joy. I want to look at the world through the eyes of how a child sees the world. I want to try and remind myself of all the beauty that's out there, how a kid stops and analyzes a piece of gravel on the ground for like 20 minutes when you're on your way to try and post a letter, that kind of stuff, because we forget the magic of what's around us every day. We get so stuck. And also we have this thing called the media, and I don't want to media bash, but I really don't enjoy going and reading the news very much anymore, because I'm searching for something positive and happy, because that's what I like to fill my life with. So I do this podcast, right? I feel inspired. Every time we finish a podcast, Mark, I always feel really uplifted. I always feel like no matter how it is coming in, I always think, yeah, that was great. You know, we covered some good stuff. Maybe a few people have left feeling a bit better about their work or their life or their writing. But so much of what overviews us, surrounds us, is all the bad things in the world. Right now, people might be saying, yeah, but Mark, look outside the window, la, la, la. But really, I look outside my window and there might be a bit of smoke, but the world is okay where we are, and I don't have the right to be miserable. I have the right to feel sorry for people who are struggling, but there's so much beauty in the world. Let's embrace that in our writing. Let's write about the conflict, because that's absolutely fodder for every writer. But in our own world as a writer, let's find the beauty of what we're doing here instead of constantly, focusing on all the struggles, because there's so much to celebrate, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of childlike wonder when you create something, and that's not to say you have to write something that's all everything is fine.
Of course,
not at all.
Yeah.
You can explore dark and difficult themes and ideas, because that again we'll talk about it in extended. This is how we make sense of the world around us, and it's not that it should ever be simplistic or childish, but childlike is that you go into it with open eyes, where anything is possible. That's the thing about being childlike.
Imagination,
awe
and wonder.
Yeah, exactly. You haven't got, children haven't been hemmed in by, you got to have a job, you got to have a mortgage, you got to do this, you got to, pay the rent, whatever it is. So if you can at least keep that childlike wonder alive in the creative part of your mind, then all that other crap can take care of itself.
and it's about separating ourselves as the writer from what we're writing about as well. Like, we can write horror, we can write thrillers, we can write, about all kinds of awful things. But as you, as the writer, protect yourself, like put that bubble around you and say, enjoy the process, love the process.
Andrea said it was a second reality going on in my brain, and I totally relate to that, because there is the real world. I'll read the news and there are upsetting things happening. Also, lots of very good little thing. There's a newsletter called Future Crunch, which is only good news about the world. It's brilliant. It's great. It'll be saying, they've done this in Africa, and these people have been vaccinated, and yada yada yada. It's all good. It comes on a Friday. It's brilliant. So there are things, but my alternate reality when I'm writing is my happy place. That's what I've referred to it as my happy place, and it is. It's great, and it's
sanctuary in many ways, isn't it? It's a place where you can go and you know it, you love it. It's personal to you, and you always come out of it usually feeling better than when you went in, and that's
usually.
Usually. And that's the thing, usually, most of the time. Absolutely. Now, one of the things I also wanted to talk about that Andrea discussed was this idea about how she was shy about being a writer. And this is a very common thing that I've come across when I meet writers, when I talk to writers. A lot of writers have this persona that they are around writing. They're very shy about being a writer. And I think it partly comes with the territory, because it's quite an introspective thing that we do. It's about being alone and writing and focusing on inner thoughts and putting them on the page. But it's interesting to see how Andrea kind of grew out of that. It's like she grew from that. She recognized that she had this shyness, but like listening to her on the podcast, you'd never imagine in a million years that she was once that shrinking violet.
Yeah. It's some. I mean, we had this very early on with Joanne Harris. She said, if you're writing, you're a writer. Simple as that. Drop the aspiring. Just if you are applying yourself to it, then you are a writer. I know a lot of people feel they can't say that legitimately until they've had something published or whatever. I think it's up to you to define what that is. But personally, I think if you're showing up every day to write, then you're a writer. And as Andrea said, the writing is what makes her happy, not the publishing. And the publishing is part of the circus that goes on around writing. But as long as you're showing up and putting pen to paper, then you're a writer as far as I'm concerned.
I think the message to people today is own it. Own it, folks. It's yours to be had. Like, take it, own it. We did this brilliant exercise, Mark, on the Academy a few months ago, where I challenged everyone during the monthly life coaching session. I said, next time you fill out an application form or any kind of form and it asks you for your occupation, I dare you to put down writer or author. And what was brilliant is quite a few people came back the next month and to like, we always celebrate people's wins and people report back and how it went, and like the failures as well. It's all part of it, but it's brilliant. And quite a few people did this. And, it was amazing to see the shift in the shift it created in their own mind, that they now believe it, they own it, and their writing's amazingly improved, and they're writing more and they're feeling more empowered, and they're telling more people, yeah, I write books. And it's almost like that transition from that shy, I'm going to keep this a big secret, I'm writing a book, but I'm not going to tell everyone, to being proud about the fact that they're writing and wanting to share it with people. And it's a bit like analogy that I always talk about in music. When I get a vocalist in the studio and I press the red button to record, during the warm-up, their voice is like an angel singing. It's beautiful. The minute I say, right, we're going to go for our first take, I hit the red button and it's like, it's like it's someone strangling them. It's literally, it's a brilliant analogy for writers, because it's almost like if you even just get stressed, your vocal cords naturally tighten and you can't sing properly. And weirdly enough, my trick is I always do all the takes during their warm-ups. They don't realize it, but I'm actually recording their vocals during their warm-ups. So here's the thing about writing. When you talk about, when you're not able to talk about in the world, it's like you're almost like restricting yourself. Your hand is tense when you're writing. And the minute you actually announce it to the world, you declare it that you want to be a writer, you relax and you own it, and it starts to flow and you start to sing beautifully, right?
One thing I think holds a lot of people back is that friends and family who don't write, who have no understanding of the writing world, right? As soon as you say to them, I'm a writer, you're going to get certain stock responses, which is, what have you written and have I heard of it? Which is always so annoying, because it's like, if you knew how many books are published every week, the odds of you having heard of it, Yeah. Exactly. And also, how much do you make from that? Are you earning a living from it? So what you're confronted with there is their definition of what constitutes a writer. And that's usually, again, media bashing again, that's usually the media going, 6-figure deal for author who's come from nowhere and they've been optioned by Ridley Scott. For them, that's like, that's what a writer is.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of us don't declare ourselves as writers because we're worried that Auntie Mabel over Christmas is going to go, well, I'm sorry, I don't see you on the shelves in W.H. Smith, so you're clearly not a writer. So we have to do a certain amount of explaining and justification of what that is. So we kind of have to, there's a barrier in that we have to step up and go, yeah, I'm a writer. I'm working on a project. I might have self-published it because that was my choice. Or I may be with a small press, or I may be with a genre publisher over here. And no, I'm not J.K. Rowling, but I'm loving my writing. I love the process. It's what makes me happy. It defines who I am, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just one of those things that we know that's part of the process, and we need to build we just need to know that people, especially people sometimes close to us, don't fully understand it. They maybe never will understand it, and that's okay. That's okay. It's just how it is, and we just move on from that. We go, your friends and family are not going to be your book reading audience. I promise you that. They'll all read your first book, but they won't be. They will not be your long term. You don't want to build a fan base around your friends and family, folks. That's the worst marketing strategy in the world. You want to be going out there and finding people that love you because they love you as a writer and love your books, and they don't know you necessarily in the same way that friends and family are. So just embrace that and love it. I mean, it's just part of the process. Now, one other thing that Andrea mentioned, which piqued my interest, was she said more people are reading a higher percentage of books than ever before. And I did a little bit of digging, Mark, because I was curious about, because I like numbers, I like stats, like how much, I want to know. So I went and had a quick search, and there's obviously stats and, lies and all the rest of it. But this was from the Bureau of the US government statistics. So it's definitely like true, right?
Oh, they wouldn't lie, would they?
Jesting aside, but no, it's really interesting because it says during the pandemic, in 2020, listen to this is insane. Consumer spending on recreational reading rose 22.9%. That's bonkers. In 1 year, 22.9. Now, it's obvious as to why
people have more time on their hands, yes.
Well, people can get out. We read more. But isn't that encouraging? Like 22. And then it wasn't just like one of those blips where, Tesla's stock price goes up one day and then it crashes the next. The following year, in 2021, it rose nearly another 2%, reaching $15.2 billion in spending on books in the US alone. So I'm really encouraged by that. As writers, we should be really encouraged that more people, and it said people are reading more than ever before. In a world where we have Netflix and we have 300 million other different streaming platforms now to choose from, like, that's something we should be celebrating?
Absolutely. There was a thing in the bookseller a couple of weeks ago. Bloomsbury announced their results, and they'd had a really good year. And they'd done a survey or something, and I think the feedback was the perception of books as value for money is really good. It's, you buy a book and it's, you will have a really good time with it, and it hangs around as well. You go to the cinema once, you spend, I don't know, a tenner on a cinema ticket, and you go in and see it for 2 hours and it's done. Or you, subscribe to Netflix and you end up not watching anything for 3 weeks or whatever, and you think, oh gosh, well that's so whereas with a book, you buy a paperback for a tenner or a paperback for 20 quid, and it's a book for life.
Yeah, or a $2.99 Kindle, and you can also. I mean, I know you can rewatch shows and things, but I think people are more likely to reread books that they really love because there's a whole experience that goes on with it. And I'm really encouraged by this because I think that when we think about value per minute or value per hour of time, I still think books are ridiculously underpriced for the amount of beauty and value that's in them. And if for example, you talked about you consume something and it's gone. I mean, let's take the example of going and having a coffee in your kind of, your posh coffee shop. You're paying a $5, whether it's US or pounds or dollars or whatever. It's gone. It's like an experience in that moment. It was nice to drink it, but then it's gone. And yet a book is, if you buy a book on Kindle, for example, it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. But even if you're a fast reader, you're just going to be multiple coffees worth of value right there, and a very different experience that you take away from it as well.
Do you know why I complained to BookBub recently? Did I tell you this? I haven't told you this, have I? Right.
Go on.
Well, they were running an ad on Facebook that I hadn't seen it. People kept complaining about it, and I hadn't seen it. I thought, maybe they're getting this wrong. This can't be right. They wouldn't word it like this. That's ridiculous. But then it popped up in my timeline. I'm like, I'm outraged. The ad was saying, still overpaying for books. Get your books for 99p in BookBub. Overpaying. So
dudes,
the inference is anything more than £1 is overpaying for a book. And I was like, so I think it was Jeevani Chirika. She complained first and said, look, here's where you do it. I was like, right, I'm doing that. So I dropped them a line and said, look, I understand the concept of marketing and promotions and, you do 99p books or free books or whatever it is. But to infer that paying anything more than £1, basically, without authors, BookBub wouldn't have a business.
Well, we've had BookBub on the podcast, and they're a great organisation, but at the same time, they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Absolutely.
Can I tell you a story just like that was crazy? I once went into a posh music PR company when I was releasing my second album. It's the first album, really successful. I'm thinking, I'm going to spend a bit of money, let's do it properly with the, like, you know, and they put all these major artists out, the big old press campaign. I sat in the room with this young, fresh out of school, new publicist, PR publicist. Now, we're talking like 2007. So you've got to go back a little bit, because it's when everyone had iTunes and it was all like downloads, and you buy them, you download them. There's no streaming. And I sat in this room, and he said, so how much is this campaign going to cost? He says, oh, well, you know, and he pulled out some ridiculous, like, you know, thousands of pounds number. And then I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, we have to negotiate a bit on that. But towards the end of the conversation, he said, we started talking about music, as you tend to, right? And he whops out this hard drive from in his bag, and he goes, oh, he said, I was at my mate's house last night, and oh, it's brilliant. He was showing me his iTunes. He's got like 10,000 songs. He said, and he just like let me download them all onto my hard disk. And I just sat there going, what the? I mean, that's how kind of like ridiculous this is that people that work in the industry don't even get it. Like talking about bite the hand that feeds you. So I ended up doing a whole campaign about how musicians were, you know, by the time you end up writing an album, you actually paid less than the minimum wage in terms of hours if you have an averagely successful book and all the rest of it. But it hardly surprises me. But folks, okay, on this podcast, we are going to champion the value of books, not value books. We need to champion the value of books, and I think the extra money that we should start pushing the cost of books up, and that extra pound or 50 cents or whatever it is goes to the author's pocket. I think we need to start doing this now, because authors, creators generally, and I've been through this with the music, man, don't get me started on Spotify, but as a creator, we are always the last in line, and that has to change. It has to change. So to all of the industry, I know a lot of you industry listening folks, you know, you are the ones that can make this change. If you want to nurture and love the industry and authors and secure your jobs in the future, and I'll say that boldly, you need to start putting more money in the authors' pockets. And we need to start making, instead of undervaluing, there should be a tipping process. Like, it shouldn't be like, you know, I went into the off license, the liquor store, as they call it in Canada. I went in and I picked up a bottle of wine, as I like to do every now and again, like a little bit of wine every now and again, not too much, but the guy was really friendly. I give him his dues. I walked in, hello, how are you? It's like kind of almost over friendly. I walked up to the counter, I put the bottle of wine on the counter, and he passed me the reader. What did the reader say, Mr. Stay? It said, tip, 15%, 18%, 21%. And I'm like,
for buying a bottle? For picking a bottle off the thing. And they're now, I'm not kidding you, it's crazy, but people in shops are asking for tips for taking your money. And I'm like, what? Yes, I'm not kidding you. The next time I'm in there, I will take a photo of it and we'll put it up on the. It has got completely ridiculous. And not only that, but they're tipping. Now, listen, anyone that's working in the service industry, you earn your tips. I think it's wrong that you have to ask for tips, because your employees should be giving you that money in your bloody pay packet. Anyway, but they've increased the numbers. You know how you get like these options? It used to be 12, 15 and 18. And now some of them start at like 18, 21, 25%. Now, the reason I'm saying all this is partly because I have a bugbear and it's just good to rant on the podcast. But the point is, why is it that someone in an off license or a liquor store can ask for like an 18% tip for taking your money, and an author charges 99 cents for a book that they've spent a year, 2 years, even 6 months of their life dedicating their life? Why is it that authors shouldn't get tips? Why shouldn't we have that as part of the whole process? So industry, sort it out, for goodness sake. This is ridiculous. It's enough's enough. We have to stop it. And authors, you have to start valuing your work. Stop putting your book on for 99 cents. Stop giving your stuff away for free. It doesn't work long term. It's a race to the bottom. And you know what free is? Free is valueless. There's no value in $0, folks. So start owning it
And let's get authors making some decent money. Sorry, rant over.
I love it when you go off on one, and I agree wholeheartedly. Although I should say I'm having a half price sale on the Robot Overlords paperback this week, so do check that out.
I love it. Oh, I absolutely love it.
And anyway, the Crow Folk is 99p on Kindle in the UK. That wasn't my decision. It's in a.
I know.
It's
a promotional thing. It should be discounted to $5 or £5, discounted to $5. That's the thing. We're all stuck now in a trap because everyone's like, well, this is what we now have to do because somebody at some point thought it was a good idea. Like, let's just remember back in the day in 1998, when I was working in the internet, when there was a brand new industry, a burgeoning industry, I worked in a big internet company, and Dixon's decided to release this competing product to ours. We were Pipex style. They released a thing called FreeServe, and you go into Dixon's to get a disc, and internet for internet for free. Well, how long did that last, folks? Like, who gets free internet today? Does anyone get? I don't get free internet. Does anyone get free internet? It doesn't work. So we're in this weird bubble, and it's a long bubble. Unfortunately, it feels like a long bubble. But I promise you, absolutely mark my words, folks. When I'm dead and buried, you can listen back to this episode in 50 years from now. There will not be books for sale for 99 cents. There won't be. Like, the proper authors that respect and value, and consumers will respect and value. They will be valued at a higher price, and that's where it has to go. It really does. I don't know where that came from. I hadn't even planned any of that. It's just, it just bugs me. It really bugs me. But we have to start with the industry and authors.
This isn't even the extended bit.
I know. We haven't got time for the extended now.
Oh, yes, we do.
All right, folks. Okay. No, but seriously, if you disagree with me or if you agree with me, I want to hear about this because, you know what? I don't want to be a lone voice shouting at industry to sort this out. Let me know what you think. Am I talking rubbish? Am I making any sense? Like, put me in my place if you think I'm out of, if you're in industry and you think I'm talking BS, then tell me. But let's have a debate about this, and let's talk about this, and let's fix it. Because it will take something like this podcast to start the debate, and maybe we can have that conversation out in the public and in the media. And as authors, we can kind of like stand up for ourselves, and and readers will support us if we ask them to. I know that. We know that for a fact, Mark, don't we? If you ask readers to support, like, they will do that because they value the work.
I think there has been damage done on the perception of this, because I did leave a comment on the ad, much like my complaint, and I did have one person go, "Oh, I only ever read 99p books." You know, there are certain people who only ever read cheap books or only ever download songs for free, but you're not gonna. You can't change the entire world.
No, of course not. No.
But you also, if you're a business, you can't pander to it either. But
yeah. It's amazing. Right. Well, we're going to dive into the extended now. If you enjoyed that, you just wait for the extended.
It's less ranty, I promise. It's a lot less ranty.
Actually, that's the thing. I'm now going to rant on the regular podcast, and we're going to be all peaceful and lovely on the extended. So if you don't want ranty, Mark. So in the extended, folks, we're going to talk about future casting. Andrew talked about, in 10 years from now, if you still haven't written that novel, how are you going to feel about it? We're going to dive into that because that's a really important reason as to why we show up. We're going to talk about being a morning person and why what Andrew said was absolute music to my ears. We're going to talk about the perspectives of being busy. This is really important, folks. If you're making excuses to yourself that you're too busy right now, believe me, you're never going to be less busy. So now is the time to write and finish that book. We're going to talk about the being a working author and owning that title. And we're also going to dive in on writing to market, whether we should do that, and also authors writing similar themes over and over. So if any of that interests you, support this podcast. There we go. We're talking about the same thing. Support creators, support this podcast. You'll get access to all that great information. You can pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. I hope I've guilted everyone into going and joining us. That wasn't the intention, folks. But if you'd like to, we'd very much appreciate it.
It's great value. It's great value.
It's great value.
Hundreds of hours of deep dives.
We've already been going like an hour and a bit. We haven't even finished. So pop along to the website and support podcast and get extra goodies. So Mark, let's shout about the wins in our bestseller experiment community this week.
Oh, this is great. Well, listeners may remember that we challenged people to write every day in May, and we had quite a few people doing it on social media, and we've had some lovely success stories. So Inkborn Blade on Twitter, it says, I moved house in the last week or so and currently have no Wi-Fi, which is why my 200 words a day tweet stopped. But he has been writing all the way through, and for the purpose of brevity, he's given me a screenshot of the word counts from that week. But basically, Inkborn Blade managed a total of 19,114 words in May, making it their most productive month since they started the 200 word a day challenge 16 months ago. So that is amazing. That is absolutely amazing.
And whilst he moved house as well.
Moving house, yeah. So, hats off, absolute hats off.
Wow, congratulations.
And also on Twitter, Alyssa Eakins, she says, I wrote a total of 10,544 words. This is double my average monthly word total since I started keeping track in October 22. Average daily was 340 words, aiming a little higher for June. Let's go. So congrats on that, Alyssa.
Isn't that amazing?
It's brilliant.
I just love this. The 200 word challenge, folks. 200wordchallenge.com. Get your words in for June. Get rocking. This is what happens. Twice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Brilliant.
And also on the wins front, over on Patreon, we got Sasha Green says, this week, my book, Something Like Happy, which was the very first book I mentioned, finally got a bestseller flag for a few hours on Amazon. Ooh. Yes, in a minor category, but I'm owning it. Listen, Sasha, we know all about minor categories getting bestsellers. It only took 4 years, but ties in well with Mr. D's message not to give up. That's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Congrats,
Sasha. Amazing. She's been such a great supporter of the show as well, always dropping us notes.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Now, you want to talk about milestones, Mr. D?
Go on.
This is absolutely brilliant. Susie Edge, who's been on the podcast for a deep dive, she's coming on the podcast later in the year. She's already a smash hit with a book called Mortal Monarchs, 1,000 Years of Royal Deaths. And she's got a book coming in September called Vital Organs, a history of the world's most famous body parts. Okay. And Susie is brilliant. She's been a smash on TikTok. She did a deep dive on TikTok for us, which you've got to listen to. And I'll put a link in the show notes. But, she's become, a bit of a figure when it comes to the royal family and royals and history and all the icky bits, and it's terrific. So she posted that on Amazon, someone has written a biography called Susie Edge, Biography of the Legend. Okay, it's by someone called Mary T, and it's got a cover that looks like it's generated by AI. And I have to say, the text sounds like it's generated by AI. So I'm going to read an extract. Okay, I'm going to read an extract. Chapter 3, Breaking Boundaries. The chapter, Breaking Boundaries, delves into Susie Edge's remarkable journey of pursuing a career against all odds. It explores the challenges she faced, the obstacles she overcame, and her invaluable contributions to her chosen field. Susie's story is one of resilience, determination, and the courage to challenge societal norms and break through barriers. The pursuit of a career against the odds. Susie's journey towards her chosen career path was marked by audacity and a refusal to conform to traditional expectations. She defied societal norms and ventured into fields that were often dominated by men or faced limited opportunities for women. This pursuit of a career against the odds reflects Susie's unwavering belief in her abilities and her relentless pursuit of her passions. I love the bland vagueness. I mean, Susie was cracking up over this, and she's put this on social media saying, what the hell is this?
This is an actual... Okay, so I need just to rewind. This is an actual book that someone has written and published on Amazon. I thought it was just some review of her as an author. This is an actual book about her that someone has generated with AI.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Whole new world. I wonder if there's a ton of other authors that have had similar kind of templated.
It's just so weird. I'll tell you what, I'm going to do a share screen thing again so you can see the cover art. Because the cover
brilliant.
Art is...
Oh, you know you've made it when AI writes a whole book about you and you're against all odds struggles. Oh my gosh, there it is. Look. Oh my God. The front front cover, Mary T.
Yeah. Let's go. So I did ask Susie for permission to share this because she finds this just hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
Absolutely brilliant. Chapter 10. Conclusion, Susie Edge, a trailblazer's journey. Yeah. Like, what? What is this? Who's done this?
Yeah. I don't know. This is, we talked about,
it's so weird. This is as weird as the guy eating carrots to our podcast. Do you remember?
And that video has disappeared. I went to look for it because it was like 10 years or 5 years or something since he put it up, and it's gone. And I'm very saddened by that.
Yeah. If anyone has a copy of that video of is it Ralph eats carrots and listening to the bestseller experiment, and he eats carrots for like 45 minutes. If anyone has a copy of that, we want it. We need it for our archives. But that is, it's actually up there. It's actually up there. Like, okay, has anyone else, question folks, has any other author out there discovered that they have a biography written by Mary T or Johnny Coffee or whatever? And because if they have, this is a whole world that we need to delve into. This is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
I'm slightly jealous I don't have one.
I was going to say, you start to get like, what do they call it in German?
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude, yeah, right. I think it's brilliant. And, you're not an author unless you've got your own, AI biography. But that's totally AI, isn't it? It's completely AI.
It says nothing. It's sentences that make sense that say nothing whatsoever. It's utterly empty calories.
I know. Brilliant. Well, let us know, folks. If you have your own biography, go and have a look. Actually, go have a look just to check.
I've just checked. I don't know.
We'll be waiting, folks. We'll be waiting for Mark's Day's biography, and we will celebrate that moment with a special podcast of two Marks. We'll do a reading from it and pick out the highlights. But yeah,
I don't even have a Wikipedia page, so
I know. What's with that?
I know.
Ridiculous. So if you'd like to get in contact, pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com and click on the contact us and tell us about your AI biography that you discovered. Oh my gosh. This gets better and better, Mark, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
What a wonderful world.
Well, folks, if you've got any good news, you can find us on social media. On Facebook, we're Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram, we are at BestsellerXP. And if you've enjoyed this, if you've been inspired by Andrea or any of the authors that we've had on the show, give us a rating because it helps. It makes us more visible. It makes all the algorithms get all excited about us and puts us in front of new readers and makes the world a better place. So do that. And thanks again, as always, to our editors, JD and Dave.
Absolutely. And if you haven't yet already, pop along to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That'd be good too. You can find a ton of fun interviews that we've done there. You can see the authors that Mark chats with, which is great. And you can also sign up to our newsletter, and you do that by going to our website, which I've mentioned many times before, and pop along to the newsletter tab, put your email address in, and we'll send you weekly updates of everything that we are doing on the podcast, things we've learned, things that you will learn as well, and extra goodies as well. So pop along to the website. 200-word challenge, folks. If you want to do the 200wordchallenge.com, free challenge to get writing habits for a lifetime, and it works. We keep on.
It really does.
What do you mean you haven't signed up to? Like, how often do we have to bang on about this on the podcast until everyone in the world's doing it? Because it works, folks. Tell your friends. And yeah, thank you to you for sticking with us on this crazy journey. I'll be back with my Valium next week, and it'll be a goodbye from Mark 1.
This might be the longest episode ever. It's a goodbye from Mark 2. Sorry, folks. Well done. Bye.
Bye.